Hey everyone, welcome to the Praecepta podcast. And nope, you're not seeing double. I have two guests with me today, and the three of us are wearing the same shirt. It's Hayley Plauger and Garretklauss. I butchered that. So these are both two saxophonists that are BG alumni who are doing some really awesome stuff, and they're going to give us a masterclass on the 12th of October. So we thought we'd do a podcast, get to know the people the behind the masterclass. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves and sort of say what you're kind of up to right now?
All right, Haley, do you want to start?
It's up to you. I can go. So as Dan said, thank you. My name is Haley. I'm currently in Pittsburgh teaching K through 8 general music. That has been taking most of my time as of now, and that's just a little bit about what I'm doing.
All right, and I gotta go off of that a little bit. Also a part of our duo is me, in addition to Haley. So my name is Garret, and I'm also a saxophonist in our duo. And pretty much what I'm doing right now is, as Haley and I just graduated from BGSU, I'm kind of also looking for I'm taking a year or two off, before maybe pursuing a DMA. I'm not too sure yet. But right now, I'm kind of just trying to figure out myself a little bit. I'm teaching lessons here in southeastern Michigan, as well as teaching as a saxophone instructor at a few schools. And then I also work as a undergraduate admissions coordinator for the College of Music at BGSU. So I am I am still around a little bit, just not as much as one would like.
Totally understandable. So you guys have a duo. Can you guys say how you met? Obviously, it was in BG, but how that kind of relationship came to be? Did you guys play together in a quartet? How did that kind of happen?
So really, it was we kind of met. One after orientation. I think we probably met at. Did we meet the night of the orientation, afterward?
Yeah,
Pretty sure that's when we first met.
yeah.
And after having quite a exquisite night of having some fun, well, we kind of were put into a quartet together, I believe, during the entirety of our first year together, as well as the majority of our second. So we've been together quite some time.
Yeah, and one of the most memorable things outside of the quartet was when we were in Pelletier's class and we had to do a recital for his class, and we did this triple duo recital with Jiao Wei. And so it was fun working with both of them. But also, Garret and I realized in quartet that we liked playing with each other. And in the triple duo recital, we had a lot of fun with that as well. So I think with those two experiences, we were like, hey, this might be fun.
Yeah, the triple duo recital was really fun because there were three of us. We did different duos with each combination, so that was the whole kind of idea of the recital, which was really cute. And actually, Haley, now that I'm looking at it, there is that poster back there with the three of us on from
Yeah.
that concert right back there. See it?
Hold on, I'm trying to point. Got it. Got it.
There. Oh man, yeah, because Jiao Wei was a he also takes pictures and stuff. So actually, he took that as part of the project. But it was that was really a lot of fun. And really because of that, that really did jumpstart our duo-ness together because we realized, wow, we're having a lot of fun with just the two of us.
Yeah.
So we decided to keep playing some stuff. We performed at NASA together. I remember there was this consortium I was a part of that we prepared the music from that. Uh, Although not all five movements, but that was it's the plan in the long run to get that done. It's a really long work. Guillermo Lago, Charlas, it was really fun. But we started doing stuff like that, and then because of that, it kind of motivated us to do other things with our duo. So it's been fun.
And when you say NASA, you're not talking about the space program.
Oh no, I meant we went to the moon and played. No, I'm just kidding. No.
Mars, but
No, it was the North American Saxophone Alliance conference. I believe it was a regional conference. Region 5?
Yeah, we went over Indiana, right? That state.
Yeah.
So we went over to Indiana.
Nice. So that's super cool. But I want to go a little deeper. When you guys were playing together, what sort of drew you guys together and made you want to kick someone out because you guys were so good together? No, I'm kidding. But what was it like? Because finding collaborators is always so hard, and I'm not I'm not as much of a performer in the contemporary classical field. So it's very interesting to me when two performers like yourself sort of resonate and gravitate towards each other. and it's external too. So if you could talk about that, getting along outside, I'd see you two together all the time outside of school as well, outside of the
Yeah,
classroom.
I think the biggest thing, I mean, minus like being a good performer, like we were in a master's program, we knew that we were there and that we were like great performers and things, but it really goes down to like what your goal is and what your vision is. So in the beginning, we knew that we get along really well, but besides that, we had the same vision in mind and we knew that we were really like detail oriented. We love planning things, and that way we knew what we were getting ourselves into with kind of having like the same end goal, and then we knew that we would be able to get there because we both would put in the same amount of effort.
Yeah, and I guys to really just add on to that, I can't stress enough how like we get along. Like really, the biggest thing is like Haley's completely right. You know, we have the same kind of direction and understanding of things. We also kind of keep ourselves organized in very similar ways, so we're kind of on the same wavelength. Oh, wavelength. Right, we're on the same wavelength most of the time, which is awesome. Other than my bad jokes, and she'll scold me for it.
That's basically what I'm here for, honestly.
But other than those sorts of things, we truly get along. We hung out with each other a significant amount of time. Can't tell you how many times we were hanging out in my apartment with like actually Chowei sometimes, and like we were hanging out with him, and or just the two of us, and we'd either be like going downtown, or really we'd be going to concerts together, or enjoying things at NASA or the Navy Symposium or what have you. We were just kind of always together. We were really good friends. We're still really good friends. Even though we're farther apart, I'm already looking to find excuses to go see her just because like I want to. So really, it's that sort of like social connection that we have that really is kind of like the biggest foundation for our group, and really all the organizational and saxophone prowess is kind of secondary to that, I would say.
Yeah, and you're definitely missing like one of the most important things. Maybe it wasn't as important to you, but cooking. We did a lot of like cooking, and it wasn't just like a normal meal. Maybe it's normal for Garrett, but a lot of the times it was like he would introduce me to something new, and I really enjoyed that and just like appreciated it so much because it was a great experience of like bonding, like cooking together. Like I love cooking, great for my mental health too, but also like learning something new just through cooking. It's just a great experience.
Yeah, we would kind of tag team meals. Like we'd sit down and be like, okay, we want to make some food. What the heck are we making? We kind of do the same thing with our music too, but we'll
Yeah.
get to that later. But it's like we sat down, we're like, what are we cooking? How are we doing? Okay, you do vegetable prep, I'll prep the meat, and then we'll do all this stuff. And then we go from like different cultural things. Like we've made a lot of like Asian dishes, or like it's anything even like from like a weird banana bread like experiment where we forget the baking soda and it doesn't rise, right? So we've cooked a lot. So I guess just in short, really, we're really good friends, and that's why we're a duo.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sort of having the external connection as well as the level that's sort of unspoken, but that's really interesting because I feel like all the best sort of collaborations I've had was when either I was tight with them or we became really tight through the process of collaboration.
Mhm.
Obviously, this is from a composer's perspective, but yeah, can you guys talk about? So you said a lot of detail orientated and similar goals. Can you define that a little more clearly, like the style of organization in terms of playing? Maybe like I don't know if this is true, but Garrett's got a bit more of an aggressive tone. I know he can circle or breathe. Or versus Haley's amazing at runs. These aren't actual things, but um, I don't know if they're not things either. But what kind of things do you guys work really well together? And are there things that one of you brings that the other one can sort of add on to? You guys also play different saxophones, so that should probably be said as well.
Well, okay, just to kind of, I guess, to kickstart off on that a little bit, we are saxophonists of pretty similar ability, and like we do have, like, I know both of us own an alto and a soprano, so we're pretty fluent on those. I know that, like, I don't think either of us really have too much tenor experience, but that's okay. Like, we could get by. And I just bought a Barry, but that's even then, I could just barely get by on that too. But like, it really is when it comes to kind of like what we work on in terms of detail orienting, it's more of like trying to assimilate to make sure that we're matching for the purpose of our ensemble. Whether it be like if I'm doing something and like when we practice individually and then we come together and we actually rehearse and we notice that there are these differences in how we interpreted something, we'll sit down and we'll talk about it, right? We'll say, do we want to emphasize this or emphasize that? You know, like, do we want this kind of like this phrase to be more gradual? Do we want to articulate something a certain way? Do we want it to have this much body versus, you know, having something to like have its duration be a certain length, or, you know, and like the little things like that. But really it's just to make sure that we match, and like have that sort of thing going for us. That way, when, you know, when we're apart, we have an idea of what the other person's thinking.
Yeah, I also want to go along with that in the detail and organization in the way that we plan things. So we will plan our rehearsals with exactly what we're going to cover. So we will go by week, depending on the circumstance. It's a little different now, but we'll plan out like which pieces we're working on, which sections, like A to C, A to wherever, and do things like that to make sure we're on the same page. And then also just making sure that we're honest. Like we've both done it a few times where we show up to rehearsal and we're like, hey, I'm still really struggling with this measure, so I'm not going to waste your time. Like, let's just skip this and it's on me, and like I'll make sure that it's good for the next time. But just making sure that we're having those honest conversations, that like in any chamber ensemble, like no one is getting frustrated with the other person, and like you're not like holding that in. It's like, nah, I messed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely the honesty thing, 100%. Because I definitely know I'll go in there, I'll botch something a bunch of times, and I'm like, you know what? I think we should just move on.
Yeah. But that's super important, and so we know then next time we have to hit that again when we're planning our rehearsal times, and then always being very specific, because Garrett talked about making sure we're matching and things, but then always using a metronome, rehearsing together and apart. So I don't know like necessarily who's listening, but always for younger players, just making sure that you're always using a metronome. But group metronome work is also equally important, and not just individual work.
Yeah. And I should say too, on top of like, you know, the planning aspect, you know, we do plan like by the minute or by the measure, you know, what we're working on. But I think it's also kind of important, especially if we do have younger listeners, because Hayley did point that out, and I think that's super important. But to have a goal for your ensemble in mind and make sure that everyone's on that same like wavelength, on that same wavelength,
Garrett.
Of making sure that we have an understanding of our goals. Like, so like we'll meet, you know, and we'll prepare some music, but after a rehearsal we'll say, okay, where do we want to be next week? Where do we want to be in a month? Where do we want to be in a year? Where do we want to be the week before our performance, right? Like having actual specific goals rather than just say we need the piece done by the performance. Like that's too vague, you know. And I feel like it's not realistic to just say I want to have it all done, right? Because, you know, we are human at the end of the day, and like the more we have like more focused goals, the more successful I believe we can be. So really, like the goal thing is super important, especially with the planning of our schedule. So for our younger listeners out there, definitely have those goals.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys have experience with the opposite as well. Just to abstract what you're saying a bit, it sounds like you need the ultimate goal, like okay, we're performing on day X, or you know the third, and then you need sort of a medium goals, and then you need micro goals. So rehearsal, group of rehearsals, and then in this case, you know, the actual concert date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of
And
like
you,
a skeleton of like goals.
yeah, but you know it's so important, and people tend to leave that out or not talk about what they're gonna do exactly, and then you get in the rehearsal, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to learn that, you know, all these sort of things can happen. But it's, you know, just like general goal structure, like that's how you do it. You have those three sort of layers, and you're addressing each one, and that, you know, tends to optimize time insanely well. So it's awesome that you guys are doing that as well. So I wanted to sort of, yeah, ask you each individually, before you got to BG, how did you kind of find like music and saxophone, or how did it find its way to you? Yeah, I'm very curious about that always. So yeah.
At my, would it be elementary school, we had this thing called the petting zoo. I don't know if everyone has it, but it's for instruments, not like goats or things. Um, and so when I went to, I guess I should say the instrument petting zoo, um, I tried out a bunch of instruments, and the saxophone was the one that I could get a sound out, and it wasn't good. Like I'm pretty sure I was splatting notes like all over the wall. I feel bad for anyone that was there, but I was super excited to learn it because I was successful in like getting a sound out. And then like from the fourth grade, I just kept playing it, and it turned out that my middle school band director was also a saxophonist, so I was able to take lessons with him, and like he was just very knowledgeable on the instrument. and a very awesome man. So I think through that, and then through like a good high school experience, that's when I just kept going, and kind of that's how I got here today.
All right. So I think at my middle school, it was kind of sort of the same deal where they had like a preview of a bunch of different instruments that you could try, and then you would pick the one that, like, like that was most suitable for you. Although instead of really making my decision at that point, it actually was like the week before that. And I'm also pretty sure it wasn't called a petting zoo.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's all good. I have no idea what it was called. But actually, I went to a. It's interesting. My saxophone journey really started when I went to a hockey game with my dad in like fifth grade. So like my uncle gave us tickets to this hockey game. I was super excited. It was the Detroit Red Wings back when Joe Louis, I believe, was still a thing. And he gave us these tickets. We met at a casino. I had to wait outside with this bouncer. It was really scary. And then after that, we went to this hockey game. We had the booth seats, or what do you call it? You call that? Man, I worked in a baseball field once. I can't remember.
A
But
box.
yeah, like the box seats up on the top, like where like all the exclusive people or the people who have like more money go. We just happened to get these from my uncle, which was really nice. And we were up there, we were watching the game from the inside on a screen, and my dad's just like, I don't really want to watch this from in here. We should just go outside and watch the game, live. Why watch it through a screen when you're at an arena? And I was a kid, whatever. I went with them. So we went outside. We sat on like the top kind of row that was out there. And I remember we're sitting down and we're at the very top of Joe Louis. And like the row in front of us, 5 seats to my right, there was this man just chewing on popcorn. He's just going to town on this popcorn. And like my dad, I'm like, he keeps looking at him like, who is that? And he's like, Garrett, that's Alto Reed. He's a saxophonist and he's cool. And I was so mesmerized by this man eating popcorn, which, later I found that, Alto Reed, the man changed his name to Alto Reed, which is crazy, right? And, he's a commercial saxophonist, played at, a lot of sports games a lot and what have you. But, seeing this man thinking he was super cool, when I went to this petting zoo thing that Hayley was talking about earlier, I immediately went to the saxophone and picked that over everything else, not because it interests me or I wanted to be like Kenny G or whatever ambitions a child may have, but it's because I thought this man eating popcorn was the coolest person alive when I was in 5th grade, and I picked this instrument. And then ever since, I kind of I went through middle school, being a dorky kid, and then I did lessons in high school, and then I auditioned on a whim because I actually didn't know if I wanted to be in music. And then I went to Oakland University for my undergrad, and now I'm here, right? All based on a single man chewing popcorn.
Yeah, we trapped you with the music stuff. You can't get out. Haley, where did you go to undergrad?
Oh, I went to IUP. It's outside of Pittsburgh.
Nice. Um, so tell me a little bit about your undergrad experiences, because those tend to be extremely formative. I know I came in kind of knowing nothing, and a lot of the themes and ideas that were sort of around me I latched onto or sort of grabbed in different ways. Did it happen to you guys, or you guys sort of like what did undergrad sort of do for you guys? Obviously, it made you awesome saxophonists, but how?
Okay, so what's interesting about my undergrad is I went through this journey of like, a kid not knowing exactly what he wanted to do in life. He just picked it because, he happened to be taking lessons, to like all the way into, deciding to want to go to grad school. So, my first year, my undergrad professor, Jeffrey Heisler, like, he took me in. We played, I'm pretty sure we just pretty much played like, I played Scaramouche the whole year before realizing, oh, he needs to actually be doing other things. Because I think he thought I was like something else at first in terms of a major. But like as soon as we hit like midway through my freshman year, he's like, okay, you need to be doing this, and this, and this. And I went from doing literally nothing to literally everything. But really, my journey through my musical growth didn't really happen so much my freshman year. It was more of my sophomore year when I went to this thing that unfortunately it isn't in existence anymore. But it was the Edmonton Saxophone Academy, which was held up in the University of Alberta with Alison Balchetta. She held it, and she brought over Marie Bernadette Charrier, one of the saxophone professor over at the Bordeaux Conservatory, which is super cool. So I had this experience where I was taking these lessons with both Alison Balchettis, Charrier, and then also this over a part of the oh my, I can't think of it right now. Her name is Marie Chantal Leclerc. She's a part of the quartet in Montreal. Oh my lord, how am I dropping?
Quasar.
She just tagged me in something. What'd you say?
Quasar.
Quasar, yeah, duh. Oh my god, I have like 4 of their CDs. But yeah, so like, she was also one of the clinicians that were there. And so, I had lessons with each of them. But it wasn't so much the lessons that motivated me as much as the environment. Because I remember once I got done with a lesson, I walked out and I was looking around for people to talk to, and no one was there. Everyone was in a practice room practicing. I felt extremely guilty. And I said, well, oh, geez, I better practice as well. And then I ended up like practicing like that whole day. I practiced like 8 hours that day because I felt so much pressure. And then we went to like Tim Hortons at like midnight or something. It was weird, but like it's interesting because like that whole event kind of spiraled me into like more growth. Because then by my junior year, I was doing more. I was competing. I was doing all these competitions, traveling to conferences, doing conference performances, and then my senior year, it was like this whole thing of like doing all these other things, like a post like concerto winner and all this stuff. Taking like my competition, my what do you call it, the conference experiences and all that, and I was motivated to be a saxophone professor at that time. And kind of wanted to go further in my study, and then I auditioned at BGSU, and here I am afterward, I should say. So I mean, really, undergrad was it was like a really fast paced change for me. It started for me not knowing exactly why I was even there to knowing exactly what I wanted to do. So it actually really, my undergrad was probably the best place for me because I feel like if I would have went anywhere else, maybe I wouldn't be here right now. So, uh, it really was a spiral of events that really started my sophomore year, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely think that wherever people end up going for undergrad, it is such an important place for them. Like the environment wise, it can kind of shape who you become as a person and a player. My so I went through 3 saxophone professors during my undergrad, so I got a lot of different kind of ideas and backgrounds and how things are done. But the biggest one was my first one, and I'd say like definitely the freshman and sophomore year are so important. But he was a retired military saxophonist, and he was just very very strict about making sure that you know all your scales, and that if you're 15 minutes, like if you're not 15 minutes before, then like you're 15 minutes late type of person. I butchered that, so I hope you know what I mean when I said the 15-minute thing. Sorry. But kind of just like instilling those like good practice habits and things like that, it kind of did shape kind of who I became, more than just like this is how you play the saxophone. Like yes, I learned that, but I also learned like time management and making sure that you tune your instrument before your first rehearsal. Just like very things that would be basic, but if no one tells you, then like a lot of people don't know that. And so just having those like very fundamental things. And then outside of that, our jazz program was like kind of on the smaller side. So I got to be in like the what they called heads group, like group one. But then I also kind of found my way playing piano in a little big band, like one of those things where you just like throw yourself into the fire and then it just makes itself work somehow type of deal. But I think like through all those experiences, it made me just like really appreciate everything that I was learning. On top of all of that, I know it's been a lot, but the ed degree, so taking methods courses, and you learn something of like how someone is supposed to play the French horn. And you're like, oh, I wonder if this is applicable to me in the saxophone. And then like it's about breathing or something, and it totally is. So then you just find something new through other instruments. So it's just very like very broad. It felt broad, but good in the sense of like I could make it and focus it on myself, in a lot of different ways. So I hope that answered your question, Tan.
Yeah, you guys are going really in depth. That's awesome. Um, you were doing a call for scores through Praecepta, which unfortunately due to COVID was canceled. We're trying to bring you back next semester. Hopefully that happens. And you got a couple of people who wrote for you. So I want to kind of talk about the commissioning process and how that kind of worked. Because I know Ben Damon, Corey Brodak, a lot of people who you guys are working with sort of knew you beforehand. And, it's like you were friends. And then, you did a call and a couple people applied and, you chose them. But How does that tend to work? I don't know how many people you got. I don't know if you guys were like denying 30 people or, but yeah, how did that kind of work for you guys? Because I know every call for scores is always a little different, especially when it's performers.
We started the process by talking to um, president and vice president of Praecepta. We talked to Chase and Emily a lot, and it went through them where we sat down. We were like, "Hey, we want to do this, and can you help us, please? And thank you," type of deal. And from that, they both, were so for it. And we started writing out our ideas. Garret and I sat down. We were like, we want this, we want this, we want this. And then we went and talked to Emily and Chase again. And then they were like, okay, now we need the formal documents. And so they helped us come up with some of the logistics and like making sure that we had deadlines and that we had specifics of what we want in it. Because this was new to both of us. We just knew that we wanted to collaborate with people in our building, our peers, our friends, colleagues, and things like that. And so they really did help us kind of like weave our way into a light of what made sense and that we could even make it this far. And so, yeah.
To add on to that a lot, like so Haley and I, we were talking about, we wanted to do certain types of performances because, at the time, I think we wanted to do like a performance of like works that we already were preparing and then doing like a call for scores thing, but then we ended up merging them just because our schedules were getting crazy and then everything got canceled. But we were talking about just, we want to just collaborate with people that, we hang out with on like a pretty frequent basis, but also we know that their music is pretty chic, you know. So so like these, one thing after another, we decided to do the call for scores. And then like Haley said, we talked to the president and vice president at the time, Chase and Emily, about like what we wanted from that, and anything from like making sure because like they were already running, I believe, a call for scores at the time. So they were already kind of in that hive mind. So we really just kind of jumped on the boat and made our own call for scores that was just within the campus of BGSU because it was exclusive to BGSU composers. But what we did is like we had this document written, like Haley said, we had like deadlines and everything, but we also kind of put like our preferences, or like I remember at the time we listed like the works that we had performed like previously to kind of give the composers an idea of like what our abilities were if they wanted to look them up, or we also gave them our contact information if they wanted to talk to us directly and say, hey, what can you do, what kinds of things are available to you. I believe we even put our instrumentation of what things at the time we were comfortable with playing, just because that's what we had access to, whether it be school instrument or something we were frequently playing on. So that way the composers kind of had an idea of like, if I want a super successful product with these two musicians, these are the things that they have at them right now. So that way, in the event of like, if we have to do something different, or, it's actually funny if something gets delayed, like this has gotten delayed, we would be able to figure it out. And so like, we all had all this information listed, and then all it was simply kind of giving a brief description and biography of us, and then really all we asked for all these composers was like, I believe it was like recordings of previous works that they've written, and then also like a little resume, so that way you have an understanding of what they've written for in the past, as well as kind of what their experiences are, so that way we can get like a big variety of different people. That way, we don't get like the same two Joe Schmoes. Not that there are any Joe Schmoes at BGSU, but like the whole process was to prevent something like that. So that way we had more variety and representation. So
Yeah, when we first started talking about this, I know it doesn't seem like too long ago, but maybe it was back then. But we came about talking about this when we wanted to have our own program and we were playing things and we were looking for pieces to play and we were just like, we don't really like these. And nothing against like the pieces or anything like that, because I feel like now you can Google search and there's a lot of young composers writing, or like emerging composers and writing for two saxophones. But back when we first started this, there really wasn't a lot. So we were trying to come up with a way that we could collaborate with people that we really liked, but then also getting things more accessible for the saxophone and like two saxophones in specifics. So that's kind of like another thing that we were thinking about when we first started this whole process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and shout out to Emily McPherson and Chase Williams. Really set up Praecepta for us to do our thing, and really did some awesome stuff. So shout out to them and the rest of the board at the time. Indigo was there, uh, as was I'm blanking on his name. Nick, yeah, Nick was there too. Um, so yeah, that's really awesome. And side note, Garrett and I have been working on sort of a project at that time. So I was like,
Still ongoing.
still ongoing due to COVID. But I know, like, just working with Garrett, he's been extremely generous with his time, extremely generous with what he likes, and open to things. There's some things that there was one thing that he didn't really like, but he's like, oh, I'll get it, man. But also on the other side, I was like, hey, if you're having trouble with this, we could shift it down like a whole step or something and figure it out. I had a bunch of, like, microtonal trilling. It's basically the whole piece. So I was like, all right, I don't really know the sax, but I'm going to put in the fingerings, and then you could sort of shut me down when they don't work. So
we spent like an hour just kind of like shooting the gun, trying to figure out what we wanted to do. We were just in a classroom, just like kind of going one after another. What can you do? Can you do this? Can you do this? I have this idea. Can you do this? And either I was like, yeah, yeah, trying to figure out kind of where we wanted. And actually, I think it went pretty well, between the two of us. Just
yeah.
on that regard.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. That's very nice. And I do like to do that. Just go there with the Zoom and the mic, and nothing crazy, but just have some samples so I can hear you playing whatever I need. But I know, sort of talking to other composers too, you guys were extremely generous with your time. There was like a packet of like the Vice and a couple other fingering charts, and a list of recordings that you guys sort of sent out as well. I was sent that too. Ben gave it to me, but just really awesome, like, resources. You guys putting it together, and you guys just being awesome with your time and very clear about what you wanted. And I think that's actually really rare, and part of the issue with classical music culture, but contemporary classical music too. There's this instrumentation, you throw a bunch of stuff at it, hopefully you get it. But cultivating these relationships, I think in the long run will sort of last, because I think you turn like 30 or so, and you can't apply to anything as a composer. I don't know if it's like
man.
that. I don't know if it's 30, but there's like a cutoff age. So yeah, but it's really awesome that you guys did that, and we'll be in contact for sure.
Yeah, that was a super, like, a very important thing that we were doing as well with the commission, or sorry, call for scores. But we made sure that if we saw things that we didn't think would work, that we made sure that we expressed that to the composers. But then also, like, when I was playing Barry, I sat down with Corey, and we went through things that would work and things that wouldn't work. And that's so important, like, collaborating with any composer, not just in what we were doing, because then that it's doable, and that, like, you're going to get the best result. And so I do think that that's important with any collaboration. So if there's ever a time when you can do that, then definitely do it.
And to kind of add on to Hayley's point, like, the biggest reason for this call for scores was for, like, getting music for us. I mean, ultimately that is the physical goal. But, like, at the end of the day, we wanted young composers, to start writing for the instrument and have more awareness of how to write for it. Like you said earlier, like, we provided a list of different recordings that we kind of, associate ourselves with pieces either that we've played or that we like. But on top of that, we, providing those physical resources and making people aware of, like, the Daniel Kinsey multiphonics book, or like the Marcus Weiss, like art saxophone playing, or I actually can't remember the name of that.
Microtonal fingering charts.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just a
bunch
part.
It's one part.
Book on everything.
Yeah.
But the Marcus Weiss, that big resource is super important, and is one of the ones that most saxophonists they use, right? But it's something that we want people to be aware of. Even mentioning, like, the Lawn Dex or anything like that. All of these different saxophone resources that are out there, that if you're struggling with understanding that even the saxophone's register, you have a physical book that you can look at to, like, have, like, I know what the saxophone can do. I understand what it can do. I can understand, like, how things are written, or, like, how things can be written. And it is a big time saver, so that way you don't end up with an alto saxophone piece with like a low G like under the staff. That's not real.
Yeah, and like you still see that. And then on top of that, there are tons and tons of books with multiphonic fingerings, but it is so like like it depends on the person. Because I know Garrett and I, we could be given the same fingering, and like depending on our tongue placement, like all of those saxophone specific things that are happening in here, depending on what's going on, like we're gonna have a different kind of sound. So that's why we really made sure that we went through any multiphonics that people put in there, because when you see the saxophone, people love to put multiphonics in those pieces. Nothing against them. Don't take that the wrong way. But because they are just like, they can be so finicky, that it is important to make sure that like your player or a player can get those out.
Yeah, and it is a lot too of like making sure that like the actual like physics of like each individual instrument, because like not only are people different, but instruments are different, brands are different. I mean, Haley, you play on Yanagisawa horns on actually no, your alto is a Selmer, but like you have a Yanagisawa soprano, like that is a completely different horn with like a completely different construction in mind versus I play pretty much all Selmer except for my Barry now. But like each of those instruments, they're different. I mean, even within their brand, they're different. So things can be very microscopic, but those microscopic differences can change a lot of things down the line. So like getting with these composers and making sure they understood us and our equipment, I think was super important to making the call for scores very successful for the ones that spent a significant amount of time with us, which there were.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, multiphonics are so interesting. My buddy who was a composer, but he got an associate's in jazz sax. I was talking to him, and he said, "There's one multiphonic that's really easy for me, but I've showed it to all these sax. Only one was able to kind of get it, and they're way better than me. It's this one, and that just sometimes happens. Some people just the way with their instrument and have a combination, and that's why writing multiphonics is sort of risky. And you should talk to your performer and do that, or you should look at databases, whichever ones are the most universal, utilize those. Heather Roach has that for clarinet, but going to her, she also has her instruments, type of reeds she uses, so exactly what's going down and why that works for her. So yeah, it is different on each instrument, and so multiphonics are particularly sort of like interesting creatures, because the notes you guys can sort of play or like bend in tune in some way, but
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, like we want to make sure that your piece, like all of the composer's pieces that we're playing, we want to play them the best that we can and like the way that you're envisioning it. So like the only way to know that that's going to happen is like through the collaboration that we've been trying to do, and just like having that open communication and just being like, hey, I really don't know if this is like what you're going for. Is this what you want? And then like talking to them about it, or just questioning like, I don't know if I can personally play this. Like, is there another way that we could get your idea through? But that way, like it'll sound good and not sloppy, and just making sure, because it's like I want to be able to play your piece, and I know I want to make sure that your piece sounds the way you want it to, and like just as you would want a good performance of your piece.
yeah, I mean, and that's really when collaboration like sort of starts. It's a little weird with contemporary music because it's not an oral tradition, right? We give you guys symbols that you interpret based on this history, but when you come to someone and they say, "Hey, I don't know if this is going to work," it's, "Oh, that's actually not the important part of it. It's the bigger line. So as long as you can get from point A to point B, you know." And you're like, "Oh, could we have this note instead? Because this is just a small, really, really piece of this bigger thing." Or, "Hey, this doesn't work, but if I kind of just growl into it, it's that kind of gets kind of gnarly instead of this multiphonic, which is quiet." Oh, that's perfect because this is the highlight of the piece. And so because you guys give us suggestions, it sort of elevates it and brings the collaboration closer, but also it optimizes the art because it's easier for you guys to play. Not easier, but it works better for you guys to play. You're more comfortable doing it, and because of that, it sounds better in context. So it represents us as composers well. So it's all just such a perfect thing. Um, but yeah, so it's super cool. Plus the sax is just a pretty interesting instrument overall. It's really it's kind of weird. It's sort of like the timbre is just interesting.
Well, the saxophone, I mean, we both can go into very lengths about the capabilities of the instrument, but I mean, like, it is quite the chameleon. You know, there's so much that it's capable of. It's louds, it's softs. You know, the different types of techniques that we can use. You know, the different types of sound and timbre that you can get depending on what you do in terms of technicality or with your face, right? In short, so like, you know, it is interesting in that like there's so much you can do. It's almost like you can do too much.
You just get a bunch of people writing pieces that use like every extended technique. And I was like, what are you doing? no, no one at BG does that, but especially not me. uh, do you guys have any projects coming up now? Obviously, you know, you guys have the Masterclass on 10/12. Can you kind of give us like a sneak preview? Not going into detail, but about like, you know, maybe topics or things you guys are looking at, sort of speaking to or speaking about.
So, I mean, really, like, you know, Haley and I, we've been talking a little bit about kind of how we are envisioning this masterclass to go. Because, as performers, our masterclass experience really is just performing for someone. You know, someone from, like Norway comes over and you play for him and you're playing a piece that either he's very experienced with or he's not. And then you have something where he critiques you. Whereas this is kind of, for us as a performer going into a composition masterclass, it's something where we kind of I have maybe an idea of how it goes because like I've been to a few Praecepta like sponsored events where like a major guest comes in and they talk about their music and then maybe even answer questions about how they approach things. So I think really kind of what we envision is more of like if people are interested in writing for the saxophone, we want to help you. We want to be able to give you the resources that you might need. Maybe if you're looking for something specifically, we can tell you how something is achieved. If you're curious on if the saxophone's able to even do anything, there's a lot of techniques the saxophone can do. Even if like Haley and I might not be capable of something, we know it's possible. So those types of questions about those physical things, and then also maybe even on like how like to prepare things for like for instrumentation or what instrumentations are available or like do you think this would sound good with this. I mean those are more opinionated, but like we want to kind of answer questions that peak like if the composer has some kind of interest in mind and they have any sort of like a question that in terms of our opinion on something or something in terms of logistics, we want to provide resources and answers for that sort of thing to help them kind of inspire them even to want to write for the instrument. Because at the end of the day, our saxophone's new. It's a new instrument. It's from the end of the 1800s. We want more music written. We need more music. We like missed so many opportunities, right? So like we kind of want to catch up, and the only way to do that is to convince more people to write for us. So we really just want to be able to answer some things and inspire people to write for the saxophone because again, it's a beautiful instrument. It does a lot of lovely things. So why not write for it?
Yeah, because we don't have players that we know. That's the. No, so I have a funny story about that actually. I went to Snow Pond, and for those of you who don't know, they used to have a composition program. I think that ended. But yeah, Neil Rolnick and Edward, I'm blanking on his name, but Dr. Sampin and one of his colleagues was there, and it's really awesome. A lot of great players. And we had a new music dorm, which means there was all composers, all percussionists, and all saxophonists. And we would just get lit up with the percussionists and like a couple. The saxophonists worked really hard because it was two really Sampin and someone else who were really, really solid. But we had a good time with them as well. And I think Neil Rolnick was the one who told us, hey, if you guys have any sax music, push it now because saxophonists are hungry. And I went up and talked to Sampin. And he's like, you got any music for my players? And I'm like, no, but I will soon. And then, we walked awkwardly in the hall for like 3 weeks before I was like, I'm Dan, by the way. I think we met at Snow Pond. He's like, oh, I recognize you. But there's sort of this mentality. My point with this is there's this new sort of mentality, especially with saxophone, because its tradition is not as old, where, you're very determined to create new rep. You're very sort of hungry and you're trying to prove, you're trying to establish it within this idiom. Obviously, it has a home in jazz, but trying to take it further than that as well. Other than percussion and you guys, I mean guitar, but guitar is sort of it has had a bunch of like other forms, but it's still relatively new. Like how old is it? Do you guys? I forgot, but
Garrett, that's a number question for you.
Well, I mean, the saxophone is, I want to say, probably like a little like over, no, it's a little over maybe 200 years old. It might be a little younger than that. Specific number I should know, but I'm blanking on it. Thanks, COVID.
I put you on the spot. It's my fault.
No, it's all good. I want to say, it's like in the 1800s. It's during that transition of like getting from like the Romantic era into 1900s. The post 20th, like that 20th century kind of music, right? That's kind of where the saxophones kind of started. And of course, it started as an orchestral instrument, but this isn't a history podcast, right? So I won't delve into that too deeply, but we're trying to create music, and like for the saxophone, we've had plenty of setbacks in our history to kind of get away. Like that's why it's pretty popular in jazz, because it was able to be comfortable there, whereas classically it was kind of shunned for a while before obviously making a very triumphant return to where it is now, right? So I mean, really, our goal is to create a lot of art music with the saxophone. I mean, personally, I know I want to outreach more than just the collegiate community, but like, ultimately, we want to create more works for the instrument that like not only is appreciated by like people with like within our own community, with the saxophone community, but like something I especially strive for, and I know that Hayley strives for, is to make sure that this music is super approachable by like across the board, across all musicians. So that way we can kind of come to this understanding and collaboration with even other musicians, and kind of make the saxophone a more legitimate instrument, right? So you're definitely right for us. Don't be shy.
For sure, for sure. And sort of going on a similar path. I'm curious, sort of why you guys are playing now and what your sort of philosophy to music and the saxophone kind of is. That's super broad, but like, what does it kind of mean to you, and what do you use it as? Maybe emotionally, or I don't know, but kind of what is it to you at this point in time?
So I can go first. Garrett, I think right now, after being in academia for so long, that I'm kind of using it more as an outlet, and kind of a way to, what's the word? Just like let some things out and kind of do things that way. One of my, thank you, express myself. One of the things that I want to do in the like next couple of years involves just having music created by underrepresented composers, and then making it more accessible to non-academic performers. I think so much can be just stuck within the four walls of academia, and when that happens, then we're just missing like such a large group of people that could be enjoying the same music that I'm enjoying. And so that's kind of a goal of mine for the next couple of years. I did just move to Pittsburgh though, so trying to make new roots there. And so I know it's going to take a while, but once I get there, that's what I'm hoping to do.
And then as for me, kind of how I view, my saxophoning and my musicianship, actually, it's funny because like going back to that Edmonton thing I talked about earlier, I remember there was one time we sat down with a saxophonist, really reputable saxophonist known as William Street. So we sat down with him, and I remember the first question he asked is like, what is the purpose of music? Actually, the first thing he said was, "What is music?" So that was a fun train. And I remember we were going down through this "what is music" question, and like each person was, explaining like, "Oh, it is this art that expresses this, and we invokes emotion," or it's something along the lines of like, it is like this type of thing that kind of like it represents the time in which it's in, all this other thing, and then they they get to me, and I look at them, and it's like, what is music? What is the purpose of music? And I'm like, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think music is to entertain, right? I mean, yeah, and music is absolutely art, but isn't art entertaining, right? Don't you go to art as an activity, right? So I view like what I do as ultimately, no matter how crazy it gets, no matter if Dan has me screaming, altissimoing, well, like multiphonicking into at all at the same time while slapping something, ultimately I want to project whatever someone's having me do as entertainment. It should entertain somebody, because like I feel like, not that you fail like as a performer, but like you want to provoke and intrigue interest, right? Now, however, that's like super broad or super narrow, there should be an audience you're gunning for. And like I feel like a lot of times, especially when you're at least from my experience when I was really heavy into competitions, I was so much more worried about like how I was doing something rather than what I should care about how the audience hears it. Not so much as like how it's portrayed, more so as how much they're engaged, right? So I view my music and I view everything that I do as I'm an entertainer at the end of the day. No matter if I'm playing Taylor Swift or if I'm doing anything with our duo, I should be entertaining someone. I kind of want to make, not that all music needs to make someone smile, but like I want someone to feel something when I'm playing, and I want them to be engaged. And then after the performance is done, they're like, "Hey, man, that was awesome!" And either they talk to me about it, or they just tell me how excited or how sad that it made them. I remember I'm not gonna name any names, but I remember I did a grad audition once, and I made someone cry right after I performed. Right, and like those sorts of moments to me are super important, and they stick with me forever. And I kind of strive more for that, and I want to be entertaining. Although that's also kind of a crutch because I tend to get a lot of pieces that are funny that are written for me. So I mean,
Dude, at
that's also,
24 by 24, when you were like Looney Tunes spinning, dude, oh my god,
pretty
when
sure I
that
did
video
like a
goes,
Zoidberg crab walk too across the stage.
it was Indigo's piece, and you just did it so well, and then you just like they didn't have the right music, so you were just like doing this like
Yeah,
ostinato thing. It was so funny, man. Anyways, sorry.
yeah. So like, I have a lot, I mean, like a lot of funnier pieces are written for me and I definitely like playing those. So if you're interested in writing something funny, let me know. But like, I want to entertain people. That's kind of my music philosophy. Cause like, obviously, you need to be good at what you do. You need to be good at your craft. You want to promote music. You want to promote certain people. Like there's so much in the package that is music that, sometimes I feel like, and I don't know if this is a hard opinion or anything, but like sometimes I feel like we forget that we're trying to entertain people. I mean, music started as entertainment back when it was like, first made, right? Like, people weren't just like, picking up instruments or creating instruments to like promote high art back then, right? It was to entertain other people, whether it be the masses or their friends or, playing in like a club for like, like exclusive people in like powdered wigs. But like, I mean, it's entertainment, and I feel like that we shouldn't strive too far from that. It's something that I mean, I've definitely had arguments and disagreements on that. So, I mean, it's certainly to be had, but ultimately, how I feel is, I want to still entertain people no matter what I do. So in terms of music philosophy and saxophone philosophy, that is definitely one of the top five things. If there are five, I'd have to actually think about that, and that's kind of a hard statement. But it's one of the
Yeah.
core values that I hold really dearly.
I do think that's a good example though of just how many different like values and opinions people can have. So coming from like a composer standpoint, not me, I'm not a composer, but I mean like if I were, no, not that. Okay, talking to composers for like advice, if you have a vision of a specific type of piece that you want to write for, the saxophone is so versatile that you can find someone that has that same vision as you. So you don't have to necessarily kind of change your vision just because you found like one person that would maybe necessarily play it. I hope that didn't come across wrong. But basically, like Garrett and I can have different visions on things, and I'm sure there's other people out there. There are so many different groups and so many different scenes, like microtonal or saxophone and percussion. Like if either of those are your jam, then like you just have to find someone that has the same vision as you, and I think like that's how you would have the best success.
Yeah, definitely. And there is sort of, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, there is a sort of push towards duos, trios, and quartets with really weird instrumentation like bass and soprano singer, um, and, like saxophone, percussion, two sopranos. And it makes more sense because you'll kind of be figured out, or trumpet and viola, where you're filling a niche and no one's really written for, and you have, two of you, so it's a little easier and you can sort of make the rounds. Looking at you two. Yeah, I have a lot to say on all of this, obviously. Well, there's sort of this museum culture with classical music, and I think, for those of you who don't really know what I'm talking about, after sort of Beethoven, it was these are our gods, Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven. Later, Bach was discovered, and you tended to see this want to preserve it, which isn't a bad thing at all. I think that's totally awesome, and awesome music was still being written at that time, right after Beethoven. but you sort of had the rep sort of being solidified at that point, right? How many other people were alive in Mozart's time that we don't know about? You know, it's just they worked in and survived because they didn't have a computer or, you know, but the interesting thing is you kind of see that carry over to academia. Most schools that I go to, even if they're new music driven, tend to have sort of a 50-50. You know, you have like the classical sort of people, and then you have the very conservative or the not conservative people who are into new music. And it's a different ratio depending on where you go. I'm thinking more undergrad scene as well, because once you become a grad student and you know you go to BG, it's very new music oriented, which is great. But it is so interesting because you know you guys are kind of talking about the tower of academia, and I feel a lot of people in our generation are having similar thoughts. I know, you know, for example, David Bird and Alec Hall, you know, have a new contemporary music organization called Qubit, and they do installations. They do, you know, contemporary classical music. They do improvisation stuff with electronics. You know, guys with synths, and then you know they'll have a DJ at the end of the night sometimes. Really cool stuff. I interned for them in undergrad. Um, so you know you do kind of see sort of reaching out, you know, and sort of putting that, you know, it was in a garage in, you know, New York, like a parking garage, and it was awesome because the reflections were crazy. So you do kind of see people sort of going outside of that, and it's awesome that you guys want to do that as well, because so much of the time it's, you know, it's the academia fueling itself, but it kind of covers the rest of the world from it, which you know could be why no one really listens to classical music. I mean, contemporary classical music is very niche in itself, but yeah, it's just, you know, it makes a lot of sense what you guys are saying, and I'm glad, you know, there's other people who sort of share that kind of vision. So for those, you know, younger people who are in BG or not in BG, I want to write for saxophone now because this podcast was awesome because of my two awesome guests. I contact Hayley, I contact Garret. They're too busy or not. But how do I go about finding a saxophone player? How do I, if I want to write for it, how do I go about cultivating these relationships? You know, in COVID, is there anything you guys can have in mind, or any things I could kind of go to, virtual concerts? How would you guys go about that if you were in a composer situation and you didn't really know the scene at all?
Well, I guess really for me, if I was in that composer situation, it's just a matter of, hunting these people down, right? So, like, for one thing, you're a student at BGSU, and I'm not just saying this because I'm admissions coordinator or anything, but you have a website, an entire website for the College of Musical Arts available to you. It's as easy as, going onto the website, going to the faculty tab, finding like who the faculty professor is. In our case, it's Dr. John Sampin, and emailing him, say, hey, I'm a composer, I'm interested in writing for this instrument. Could you point me into the direction of your, either if you're looking for grad students, if you're looking for undergrad students, whoever, and just having that confidence enough to just email him, because I mean, Dr. Sampin is a quite nice individual. He's also really responsive with his email. I am very confident in saying that. So all you really have to do is just reach out, or if you have classes and you've noticed like I know that like BGSU also has this whole thing where they have like their woodwinds and their things separated out. They have those pictures or whatever. But if you can find out like who's in your class, you can also make those relationships through your class to say, hey, do you know if there's any saxophonists in here? Like to just kind of snoop them out and find them out. In terms of like online concerts and stuff, I'm not sure what's going on with that right now at the school. So I couldn't really speak on that, but I know that there's a lot of things going on with the new music festival. I know that the current graduate saxophone quartets. I don't know if it's both of them. I know that there is saxophoning going on at the new music festival for sure, and I know there's definitely quartet stuff that has been recorded. Not that I'm trying to spoil anything, but like I know that has been happening. So like find out, like, if you attend the new music festival, find out who are these saxophonists. Like, can I reach out to them, and if they're not available, can they send me somewhere else? And I guarantee you, if it's the people that I think it is, they definitely will, right? At the end of the day, because our community's so young and we have so many people, and we like conglomerate with each other so much, because we have the Navy Saxophone Symposium and then North American Saxophone Alliance conferences that we go to. We're around each other all the time. Like, we can point you in the right direction, and we're super friendly and super social. So it really is just a matter of like stepping out of your comfort zone and just reaching out, sending an email, sending like a message, or like if you have someone in your class that's a saxophonist, it's like, hey man, like, do you like new music, bro? Like, what's good, man? It's really just having the confidence to reach out, because I feel like sometimes people are shy, and that's okay. I'm a very talkative person, so I can't speak on behalf of that, but I know people are shy. Um, so like it really is just making sure that like if you want to write for the saxophone really badly, just reach out like via like again the website, or if you see people in your class or whatever, ask them. They're totally willing to help you, guaranteed.
Yeah,
Like,
the biggest thing is just like taking that first step and asking. At the end of the day, I'm a person, Garrett's a person. We want to play things. I'm sure most performers do. So you just have to ask. I remember I was trying to find a cellist for my recital. I saw Roberta eating lunch in the green room. I walked up to her and I said, "Hey, do you play cello, right?" And she said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Can you look at this piece? I'm trying to find someone to play with me." And then like, a couple of months later, like that was at my recital. So it really is just finding a way to ask. If it's in person, probably not now, but online, sending a message, and then just showing that you're a person too. And like that's just how it is. So I think y'all can do it.
yeah, and like it's also one of those things too, because it is a COVID time. Like if you are interested in writing for saxophone listeners out there, like I believe that like at some point, I don't know if when we're gonna plug contact information, but if you want to just email Hayley or I, we can totally point you in the right direction. Just let us know.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
put that
Sure.
we'll put that in the description. If you guys could drop that in our Facebook chat after this.
Awesome.
But yeah, New Music Fest. Uh, Shout out to Kurt Doles for putting it together. Shout out to Mike Lorello for recording it all. November 15th, 16th, and 17th. I think it was like the saxophone's turn, so there's like some pieces for saxophone. I believe one of them was commissioned. And then, yeah, like even if you're not from BG, you could still watch these concerts and you could still email Sampin. Uh, it's totally possible. And giving people the steps I think helps, because especially if you're like a freshman and you're like, I don't know what's up. It can help. So, anyways, I want to thank you guys so much for coming. If you guys have anything you want to plug, Masterclass, October 12th with these two awesome performers. Is there anything else you guys want to sort of plug? Anything you're doing?
So, in terms of like what we're immediately doing, it's kind of a certainty and it's kind of a little unknown at the moment. But we are planning on our duo recital being at some point in the spring. I think right now it wants to be later in the semester, so just keep on a lookout for that. Because once we plan that, because Hayley is in Pennsylvania, I am in Michigan. We are quite a distance away, so we're still in the logistics of figuring that out. We are working on the work on those works. So those who are worried about that, we are looking at your music. We're just trying to figure out the logistics of this, because it's quite different now that we're not at BG. But it is going to happen. It's going to happen in April. Keep a lookout for that. Hopefully we'll send some updates to Praecepta soon so they can let you guys know. So in terms of plugging performance-related things, there's that. And then in terms of contact informations, I'll give Dan on my contact information. Hayley, I'm sure will give him her contact information too. So if you want to reach out to us, whether you have questions about this podcast, or like questions about saxophone or anything, or if you had any specific like inquiries in terms of like maybe a possible commission or anything, feel free to talk to us, or just want to say hi, say hi.
Yes.
Awesome. So link in the description, smash the subscribe button, and we'll see you at the next Praecepta podcast.